This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, well, hi everybody. So this is the iClinic presentation with Dr. Bucca from the Barbara Davis Center. Right now his video isn't working, so we're going to have his audio, but he will present any questions that you have either right now or when you view this. You can either email me at paige@childrensdiabetesfoundation.org or ask them live. So Dr. Bucca, it is over to you.
Thank you very much, Paige. It's such a pleasure to talk to everyone today about what I do at the Barbara Davis Center. I am the iClinic director, and I've been here for about 13 years at the Barbara Davis Center. So I am fully aware of the power of the institution, and I'm proud to be a part of it. Hopefully today you'll come out with a lot of answers and a lot of knowledge. And that's basically what I do throughout the day is, my patients, I want to give them knowledge so they can make better decisions about, their diabetes by knowing about one of the most important, I think, complications of diabetes is diabetic retinopathy, which can impact one's sight, which is, I believe to be one of the most important of the five senses. So let me move forward here. So first of all, about me, the professional part of me is, like I said, I've been here for 13 years. I graduated in 2001, sorry, and I started off doing my residency at the Indian Health Service in Shiprock, New Mexico, basically right in the Four Corners region. Shiprock is the most major town that's closest to the Four Corners in New Mexico. So I was working with the Navajo population, the Native American population there, and it kind of fell into diabetes. And I was doing type 2 diabetes. My population was a lot older than it is here today at the Bdci. There were 65, 50% of them didn't speak English. And I just fell in love with not only the population there, because it was very much different than my upbringing, but they were very, very cheerful people, and they welcomed me with open arms and open hearts. And we had to, talk through interpreters most of the time, but I had the feeling that they appreciated the care that I gave them. But in 2001, I joined the BDC and crossed over the wall to type 1 diabetes with an average population of somewhere in the 30s. Everybody, for the most part, speaks English, and everybody seems to be pretty involved with their diabetes. And there's lots of questions about all different aspects of diabetic retinopathy, which I absolutely welcome. And that was in contrast to my Native American population, which it was so many barriers to care there, but there's so much disease to treat, and there's so much to learn that they didn't have a lot of questions, which I thought was really interesting. But the population here is very engaging, which I really love. So I fell into diabetes on accident and found out that it was, is something that would keep my interest and keep my professional mind very, very active. So I'm proud to be at the Barbara Davis Center. As far as the person, I am a father, I am a husband, I have 2 children, a boy and a girl, and Owen is 10, Maisie is 6, wonderful kids. Just got through taking a shower and got out of the room just in time for me to join this wonderful group here. So I have many things I like to do. I take a yearly backpacking trip with either my dad or my friends, hopefully for 5 to 7 days, and just kind of just get away from society and just disconnect, basically. Cycling and playing guitar since I was 14, and photography. So lots of expensive hobbies is what my wife says. So I have to, whatever hobby I have to pick up, it has to be not as expensive, I think. So, but anyway, I love to keep busy doing these things, but I think my kids keep me busy doing most stuff, as most people know. I am the only doctor at the Barbara Davis Center. I have 2 support staff, Heidi Eichenhorst, who's been with me for 6 years, and she is my right-hand woman. She's the queen of all trades, and she works up patients, and we are a great team together. Rachel Johnson has been on the staff for 1 year, and she's our wonderful receptionist. She's my left hand, and without them, this clinic just wouldn't work. So those are, if everybody visits the eye clinic, you will see both of these wonderful women, and hopefully treated very well and with open hearts and open smiles there. So our mission statement obviously is to prevent eye disease and vision loss through, what are the important things here is accurate detection through our softwares and our machines that we use, and I'll go over those. Comprehensive patient education, which absolutely is important, and I alluded to at the beginning of this talk, was just it's so important for people to know about the disease process and how it works. We call it the pathophysiology. And it's so, the more a person can understand a process, the more they are empowered to prevent that process, in this case, prevent. And providing compassionate and individualized care. I mean, I've seen and heard of actually providers that treat people differently, and not to say differently, but just they're always, you can either take a supportive attitude towards people with diabetes, whether they're taking care of their diabetes or not, or you can have an apathetic attitude, or you can have an accusatory attitude, and those other two just aren't really the way to go, in my opinion. So I mean, I really, through 20 years of being in the field of diabetic retinopathy, it's important to level with your patients, become compassionate, and listen to what's going on in their lives and individualize that compassion, and really just kind of identify with these patients. So I hope patients can sense that as they move through the clinic. I want to provide an environment that's, people come with all sorts of different types of anxieties and about what I'm going to tell them or what I might find. And my goal is to level that playing field and just provide that, and just kind of put them at ease. So I always used to say that one of my goals was to let's make this patient laugh today, and especially the ones that are most suffering from the anxiety of what I might tell them. So my goals for every patient is, like I said, provide that genuine understanding of what's happening and provide that individual care. Basic understanding of what's could be going on in somebody's eyes. If they don't have anything going on, there's still something worth learning about the eye, whether you're talking about anatomy or whatever. And if there's something to show them, to make sure that they understand what I'm trying to get across to them. And I want to motivate patients to make better decisions about how, if in those patients that need to make better decisions, I want to motivate them. I always talk about this fine line between motivation and alienation. Certainly, you don't want to go to the alienation side, but it is a razor's edge sometimes with people. Is you really have to, be able to talk people, almost off the ledge a little bit, but also motivating them, and I don't say scaring, but it's people who I see who are making, who could make better decisions. It is the time to try to motivate patients, especially if they're ramping up in the retinopathy severity scale, is to this could happen, but you still have a chance to do really good things. So it's really important to be a motivator, and also to provide congratulations to those who are doing a good job. It's so hard for people to deal with diabetes every single second of their life and think about what am I going to eat? How many units do I need to take? When do I need to bolus? I don't have diabetes, but I've seen thousands and thousands of people with diabetes, and I hear their stories. And and specifically with type 1 diabetes, people didn't ask for this process to happen in their bodies, and it's so important that that people can receive that congratulations, which could serve as a further motivator for them to keep making those good decisions. So anyway, it's not about it's about motivation, but it's also about congratulations. So now getting down to the meat and the bones of what is diabetic retinopathy. Well, first of all, that's a very big term, and it's our scientific term for diabetes changes in the eye that happens because of high and fluctuating blood sugars. So The eye is a very special organ. Again, my bias, but it's the only place where we can see these blood vessels directly in the human body that are internal to the body. And we can see this process happening. And I always tell patients that, this isn't a number that is being produced in your life. It's not an A1C, it's not a cholesterol, it's not a kidney value. This is something that you can actually physically see going on in your body, and we don't need this weird scientific laboratory test to tell us stuff. So retinopathy in that way, and the eye in that way, really is a window to the body so we can see through it. How common is diabetic retinopathy? Well, it is very common. It has all sorts of different severities. And to my patients, I describe a scale from 0 to 10, 0 meaning nothing, 10 meaning you need treatment, right? So the beginning of diabetic retinopathy, these mild stages, are super common in the fact that no matter really what your A1C or what your blood sugars are, how much they fluctuate, how in control they are, how hard you're trying, and it really shows after 15, 20 years, it's very common to see these very mild things from diabetic retinopathy. And but those aren't worrisome types of things. But if you have diabetes long enough, or if a person has diabetes long enough, it's going to be very common to be able to see these changes if you're looking for them with intent. And if you're looking for them hard enough, yes, it's very common to see mild stuff. But how common is the more serious stuff, the stuff that needs treatment? Only about 5 to 7% of people with diabetes will develop the need or develop these very, very advanced complications that will need treatment. So it's not super common, but if you multiply that time millions of people with diabetes, at least in the United States, that's a huge number of people. But 5 to 7% of people will end up needing treatment. So it takes about, here's throwing some epidemiological and crazy scientific facts at you, but it takes about 20 to 25 years on the average for a person to progress from 0 to 10 to needing treatment, if it's gonna happen. And and I always say to my patients, you kind of really have to not be trying with your diabetes in order to allow yourself to move up the scale. In most cases, there are always these outlying cases where it's kind of unexplainable, like why did that happen to that person? They were doing a pretty decent job. But for the people who really are might be in denial or ignoring the fact that diabetes is having an effect on them, about 20 to 25 years it takes for a person to develop something that needs treatment. So and there's a ton of people that are stuck in the middle of that scale. And on that scale of 0 to 10, people could be 6 for all of their lives and never move up to 10. So that's super common as well. It's I always tell patients there's 3 measures of success in the world of diabetic retinopathy. The first measure is to just bust it out and do a good job, and no matter how hard that might be for whoever it is, and then you will prevent 90% of on that scale of 0 to 10, and that's great. You don't have to live your life in fear or in anxiety, wondering if you're going to lose your vision. You just got to put the work in, which is obviously very hard. The second measure of success is okay, I got some retinopathy, but now I'm going to hunker down, and you're stuck in the middle of the scale. Great, okay. But if you're stuck in the middle of the scale, at least you're not progressing up to 10. So you can put the brakes on this process once it starts. But that, say you've taken a vacation for the first 10 years of your diabetes and you're showing signs, you can apply the brakes by lowering your A1C and preventing that further progression up the retinopathy scale. So that's why a lot of people are in the middle of my scale. The third measure of success is, okay, these people progress all the way to 10 and they need treatment, but the goal is to find somebody who knows what they're doing to find that retinopathy, to stage it, and to follow you appropriately, which these yearly exams could be cut from every 6 months to every 3 months in order to find those things that require treatment early on in the process and treat those things so we can prevent vision loss. So the treatments are very effective if we can identify those things that need treatment early on in the process. So, I mean, I guess that kind of skirts around the fact that, I mean, people could need treatment and their vision wouldn't even be affected. And if you can treat that, then a person gets to keep their vision, which is great. So obviously going to that third measure of success is stressful and anxiety provoking, but hopefully throughout, their duration of diabetes, they're seeing somebody that can identify with them and again, offer that compassionate, individualized care and try to motivate them. So how do people prevent diabetic retinopathy? Well, if anybody has diabetes for 15 years, they're going to have some of that mild stuff, like I said. So you can't prevent everything, as we know about everything we know about diabetes today and our insulins and all of our technology, wonderful technology. We're still not preventing the very, very, very minor stuff. But how do you prevent progression, I guess, is what this question should be. Well, that's 90% of that is controlling blood sugars. It really, I like to say that the simple fact is you only have to really concentrate on one thing for most people. It's you have diabetes, you got this blood sugar thing that you have to control, but at least it's not like 6 or 7 other things. It's like that is your focus, to keep your A1C down, to not make it fluctuate too much is also a thing. You don't want to be, person who has, if your average is 8, you don't want to be 8, 10, 6, 14, 8, 6. So you really don't want to see a lot of fluctuations in there too. So, but controlling blood sugars, and there's all sorts of different types of situations where A1C can kind of factor in. I mean, I look at A1C and duration of diabetes on every patient because those are the two most powerful predictors of who's going to have what going on in their eyes. So you can't control how long you have diabetes. So that's a risk factor that's not even controllable. But the controllable thing is what are your blood sugars? What is your A1C? And keeping that low and stable. Basically your brain has to be a pancreas, right? I tell my patients that and I joke around a lot, but you have to, pancreas isn't functioning, so your brain has to assume that role there. So there's lots of things to say about A1C and just what daily blood sugars are. But studies are telling us now that you really kind of don't want a lot of fluctuation in your daily blood sugars either. But I mean, most of our information comes from what your A1C has been and what your A1C characteristics, which is, one A1C is an average of what your blood sugars have been over the last 3 months. So from the 1950s and 60s, ever since diabetic retinopathy studies have been going on, it's all been about, how do we use A1C to determine risk? But now that we have continuous blood monitors, a lot of questions are starting to be asked. Well, what do these daily fluctuations do? And what does this term called time and range, that 80 to 120, how much time out of that range or how much time in that range is associated with retinopathy progression? So lots of blood sugar issues, not issues, but lots of blood sugars go into trying to prevent this thing we call diabetic retinopathy. So in type 2 diabetes, and in type 1, you have some other coexistent conditions like high blood pressure is also something that needs to be controlled on top of diabetes. I mean, blood pressure, if you have too much pressure in the blood, this blood is shearing against the inner walls of these blood vessels. And that's not necessarily what diabetic retinopathy is doing. I guess we could talk about that too. But just basically for this talk, you have two things that are causing damage to vasculature or blood vessels by two different mechanisms. And if they're both uncontrolled, it can really act synergistically to make this process move forward. When it really, if it's just diabetic retinopathy itself, it's a fairly slow process. So watching these coexistent conditions like hypertension is really, really important. So. Let's talk about the diabetic retinopathy. Going back to what is it? Well, just talked about blood pressure shearing against the walls of these blood vessel, of the internal walls of the blood vessels, creates a lot of inflammation inside of the blood vessel wall and just weakens that blood vessel. So if you, going back to diabetic retinopathy, you have blood sugars that just say no blood pressure issues are involved. You just have high or fluctuating blood sugar. So you have this column of a blood vessel, and on the internal walls of that blood vessel is constantly in contact with blood and its blood sugars. Well, you don't want blood sugars to be too high. You don't want them to be too low. But it particularly highs and the fluctuation of these blood sugars, it's really kind of toxic to the inner cells, these sensitive inner cells of these blood vessels, and it can kill those inner cells. And these blood vessels in the retina, the one we'll be talking about, are just like one little cell layer thick. So if you're stripping away that layer, those blood vessels become very weakened, and the blood vessels in the retina, particularly the capillaries, the connections between the arteries and veins, are very fragile. They're supposed to be watertight. And if you strip away a layer of, if you strip away a layer of those cells, those blood vessels become very leaky. So things can leak out, you know. And also, if the blood vessel becomes weakened enough, blood can't flow through that vessel, and basically leaving that retina that's downstream of that, that weakening, to, fend for itself as far as blood supply goes. So you have a vessel weakening, you have vessel leaking, and you also have blood flow issues. And once we start having that problem to a greater degree, then that's when we can actually see some of these things happening in the retina. So let's go into what does it look like. This is a picture of a retina. We take pictures on every patient we see that comes through the clinic, and that's done for a lot of different reasons. Documentation, education for sure. I mean, if you can sit here and show patients their retina, a part of their body that they've never seen before, and teach them about this, this is a valuable tool, because, again, my bias is seeing is believing. But this is a left eye, and the big circle, yellow circle on the left there, this little guy, is called the optic nerve, and that's that's a straight shot, neurologic connection to the brain itself. So I mean, this retina really is an extension of the brain. So this is the very back inner lining of the eye, and it's the last thing light hits, going through all the structures of the eye. So light coming from our universe goes through the front portions, the middle portions, and then hits this retina, which is a bunch of neurons and blood vessels, and an electrical signal is created. And then that's put into this optic nerve, and then that optic nerve sends that eventually to the back of the brain, which is where the visual cortex is. So the visual signal has to go from the retina all the way through the pathways to the brain, to the back of the brain. So it's kind of interesting that vision starts at the front and then ends in the back. And we can use that fact for many different disease diagnoses and different tests and stuff like that, but we won't go into that. So in order to make that visual signal, blood flow is needed, just like the function of all of our organs. Blood flow is needed to maintain homeostasis and just being and functioning of all of these tissues. Blood comes in through these lighter red arteries, and then somehow makes it into these veins, these darker red veins here, and goes back out of the optic nerve. Well, how it makes that connection, we don't see those connections between the arteries and the veins, but they exist everywhere in between these blood vessels that we can see, and those are where the capillaries are. It's a very dense capillary network there. Like I said, one cell layer thick, very fragile, and that's what diabetes picks on for the most part. And that's when what I spend a lot of my time doing is looking in between the lines for different things. And there's about 9 different things that we look for. They can be subdivided into mild things, moderate things, severe things, and all of those things don't even require treatment. That's like 7 of the 9 things in that mild, moderate, severe category. But there's only 2 things that really need treatment, and that's what's beyond that severe stage there. So we'll kind of go through that. But this is a normal retina. I don't see anything happening in between the vessels here. Basically, what you want to see is just nothing. You don't want to see any features at all. And like I said, we're looking for about 9 different features. So you may be looking at this feature. that is what we call the fovea, and that's what's responsible for fine, detailed, and color vision in this very small area, this little area right there. So a very important part for vision, and we want to protect that part at all costs. So one of the things that needs treatment, one of the two things that need treatment occurs in this area. And what it is the vessels, like I said, get leaky, and then the clear constituent of the blood called plasma. Like if you were to put blood in a tube and then spin it around really fast, you get the red blood cells that to separate from the plasma, which is clear. But that plasma can leak out, and if it accumulates right there, I mean, light is trying to focus in that area primarily because that's where our detailed vision is. And if it's got to go through fluid before it hits those neurons of the retina, then we're not going to see so good in that area. So it's we don't see very well underwater. So we really want to prevent that fluid from accumulating there. Now, if that happens out here, it's not as meaningful because we don't see so well out here in the peripheral retina. And really, this is where most of the 9 things happen, is kind of adjacent to this area or kind of way out in the periphery. I mean, the retina extends way beyond what's here in this picture. But if the things stay out there, then a person could have all 9 of these things and need treatment. And as long as this area remains unaffected by diabetes, the person could have 20/20 vision and actually need treatment. And that's a pretty common thing, to be honest with you. A lot of my patients I see graduate from 0 to 10, and I'm following closer and closer, and they have 20/20 vision, and stuff is watching stuff out here, and then they'll convert to needing treatment for something happening out here, and they're like, oh yeah, I couldn't even tell that was going on. So it's a misnomer for a person to know something's going on. It has to happen right here for a person to know, but most of the time it is going on here more peripherally. So moving on, this is an example of a picture that I take, and with our camera that we take these retinal pictures with, we can then use the software. You can see the difference between the color between this picture and this picture. This one's a lot more green. And in this particular square is what this is showing us. And if you look in between the lines, we can see a feature right there. That's a microaneurysm, and that's the first thing that people have as a result of diabetes if they have long enough. If they have it long enough, this is the very first feature that we expect to see sometime between 10 and 15 years. So this is a very minor change. But when you get into looking at these blood vessels, they look very fine. They look very confused about where they're going. Well, these are blood vessels that need treatment. This is the very early phase of blood vessels that need treatment, and I didn't really talk about those, but this is the second thing that needs treatment. So what's happening underneath the surface of this retina is that the capillaries are becoming weakened. Blood is not flowing to greater and greater areas of the retina, and eventually the retina is going to get this idea that it needs to grow new blood vessels to try to compensate for that process. Which sounds like a pretty good idea to most people, but these are the types of blood vessels that can really cause bad things to happen. They're very dysfunctional. They're very fragile. They can bleed very easily into the back chamber of the eye. And also, if left alone, they grow with this sticky tissue that, and if they continue to start to grow, that tissue contracts and can and it's attached to the retina, and as it contracts, it can actually pull the retina off the back of the eye. So that's how persons with diabetes, as a result of diabetes, can cause a retinal detachment. So that's what I do. I look in between the blood vessels for features, and I can see here that this blood vessel is doing something weird here, this one here. Certainly this is not normal to me. And then you see this hook. I mean, blood vessels are supposed to take a straight path from A to B because that's the most efficient. But when you start seeing these humps and loops and stuff, that's what we're looking for. This is a very advanced case here. What I look at here, if I go back, this is, like I said, this is a very small patch. Well, this is a huge patch here of new blood vessels that are trying to grow. I mean, most of the pattern of these blood vessels are going, kind of in a sinuous pathway. They don't waste a lot of time getting from point A to point B, but you can see this looks like a net of blood vessels that are just confused about what they want to do. So these are the new blood vessels. And really, when a person starts growing new blood vessels, that is a 10 on my scale of 0 to 10. So this is the ultimate response to lack of blood flow, poor blood sugar management, and just moving on to this picture, there's more blood vessels out here. You can just see there's so many little blood vessels right here. And nothing's happening to this area. This is the central vision. So this person was 20 something years old, and they didn't know anything was going on because this area looked fine. This is their central detail vision, where we get a lot of our information throughout our day. And this was totally unbeknownst to the patient here. So, this is why we tell patients, it would be great to see you every year. That's the recommendation from the American Diabetes Association, because stuff like this can happen without people knowing about it. So you may be asking yourself, well, why does it need treatment if they don't know that they have it? Well, if you left this alone, like I said, these vessels bleed very easily, and they also can cause retinal detachment. So it's going to catch up if you don't catch it sooner or later. So, this is another pretty advanced picture. This, you have some hemorrhaging here and some new blood vessels coming off of this optic nerve. So, I mean, I don't want to get too into depth, but this has almost all 9 of the things that I was talking about. You can see these white things are called cotton wool spots. There is this vein here has a bunch of beads on it, so we call that venous beading. So we don't have to get too in depth, but it doesn't take, too much of a person to kind of figure out that something's wrong with this eye. The treatment for fluid in this particular part of the eye, this is where the fovea is, I'll go back here, the central vision right here. If there was fluid happening right there, what the treatment is these days is there is so what's causing that biochemically is this kind of distress signal that's being sent off by the retina that isn't getting the blood it needs. So it's sending out this distress signal saying, I'm not getting blood, I'm not getting blood. And as that distress signal rises and rises and rises, it causes this type of stuff to happen. And if fluid is happening there, what happens, what the treatment is there's an injection in the eye, which is a motivator for a lot of patients too, when I tell them about this shot thing, that blocks that distress signal and then can dry up this fluid-filled area right there. So the growth of new blood vessels, the traditional treatment for that is the addition of laser, really effectively burning the retina in the peripheral portions of the retina. There's no laser here, but you can, if you, for lack of a better term, if you burn it, it doesn't need that blood flow. So there's no reason for those new blood vessels to grow. So they end up shrinking up. And that's what this picture is all about. These dots and spots and leopard pattern is the addition of laser to the retina, and has made whatever blood vessels were there kind of shrink up, and you can't really see them anymore. I do see this little white area right here. That's that really sticky fibrous tissue that, if left alone, could pull the retina off the back of the eye. Even because of even after the laser, the blood vessels will go away, but you'll always, the person who has this sticky tissue, you'll always see that as a remnant of what was. This is some of the technology we run on all of our patients. This is called an OCT, or an optical coherence tomography scan. It's a pretty fancy word there. But if you look at this, you've seen lots of pictures of the retina now, but we're just looking in this box basically at this area of the retina, which the central vision is right in the crosshairs there. We're looking for fluid, like I said, one of those 2 things that needs treatment. This is the topography of what's in the box. You can see that there's a pit there. Maybe you can see there's a pit there. But light's trying to focus there, and we don't want fluid to thicken that pit, and that would reduce our vision. Well, I don't know how to exactly explain this, but instead of looking at the retina straight in front of you, if you turned it on its side, like looking at the side of a sandwich, you can see the profile view of that pit here. And then this is a high definition scan. You can definitely see this pit here and all those retinal layers there that we can visualize here. But we're looking for fluid. This is fluid on the inside of the eye. So seeing something like this within the confines of the retina would be something that we'd be looking for on the scan. So here's an example of somebody with fluid in that retina. You can see there's lots of different spaces in here. You can see on the color graph here that that's the same thing over here, but this is our high definition scan that just kind of, this is different than that. And it's not usually that profound, but I just wanted to show you guys what that would look like to some degree. But a lot of the times it's not that severe. We can also use this OCT to determine the completeness of blood flow in that box. You can see these major blood vessels, but I was talking about all these capillaries that are occupying the spaces in between all these blood vessels actually do exist. You can see them here, all throughout here, this web of blood vessels. And I'll show you a scan where it's not so well, blood flow isn't so well, but this is a perfect looking scan. There's no blood flow here by design. We don't need to really get into that, but that's the central vision that relies on blood flow in a different way. So this is normal. And you can see here that there is no blood flow in these areas here, where it's completely empty. And there is blood flow here. So up to about 10 years ago, this type of scan wasn't possible, and there was an injection in the arm of this dye that needed to happen. And what would happen is somebody would take a picture with a certain filter, and they would image that blood flow as it went through the veins and as it coursed through the arteries and the capillaries to determine this. And now with the OCT technology, we can do that without any injection. That dye caused there's a lot of reactions to that dye, allergic reactions, and it just made people really nauseous. And doctors still do use that. There is a need for that in cases, but now we can do it pretty easily without even dilating the eye to take a look and see what the blood flow is here. Okay. Well, I have talked quite a bit, and I hope I haven't went over anybody's heads or anything like that, but this is what we do in the eye clinic. We do this every day. We see patients that have minimal retinopathy and some that have advanced retinopathy. We're happy to see everybody, of course, but I hope somebody's taken away something from what I've said today. And I'll open it up for any questions, or wherever we go from here, Paige. I'd be glad to continue.
Well, first and foremost, I've been to your eye clinic many times. Started at the Bdci back in 2007, so I know you on that level. But this actually helped me a lot as a type 1, because honestly, for that whole appointment, I'm just nervous about things sticking in my eye and the anxiety that you see. One of the questions that we have, so with type 1, is there a guarantee of some kind of eye issue in their life? Is there a possibility of having no eye issues ever? What is that process like?
Yeah. Well, there's an issue of having something that you won't notice in everybody that has diabetes long enough, like I kind of went over. But like I said, the overall in the United States, there's a 5 to 7% of the population that will need treatment, but those people may never even realize that something's going on. Their vision is still 20/20 before and after the treatment too. So yes, there is a guarantee we're going to find something. But a lot of people who have treatment don't even know that they have it. It's unfortunate for those that aren't compliant with their eye exams, or might be seeing somebody that may not be as experienced, where it's not getting seen, these serious things, and then they bloom into something that causes a symptom at that point. And then at that point, it's still possible to get your vision back. It just depends on how serious that stuff is.
Gotcha. And then another question. So when you talked about those swings in the range and going from a 10 A1C to a 7 and having very little time in range overall and all that kind of stuff, how fast do most of these eye issues happen if you have those extreme highs and lows in blood sugar?
It's not very fast. It's a slow process overall, so there's plenty of time to react for the patient. It's like I say, most of our information comes from A1C, which is an average of 3 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have patients that are in variable control. Let's just take a person who's in good control, maybe just 7 or maybe 7.5, pretty consistently. Whether they're fluctuating a tiny bit, I don't really worry about. But like, oh my God, I got sick, or I was in the hospital and my A1C just went sky high and I scored like a 10. It's I give them a little bit of grace and say, you know what, you've invested so much time and you're good control, that isn't going to factor in. Just, stay on par. It's like investing, really. If you take a look at your horizon and you keep your eye on the horizon and you just maintain the course, you're going to be fine, whether you have a little bumps in the road or not. Don't divest your money. Just keep on going forward.
Okay. Next question. So does everyone get regular checkups at the BDC Eye Center once they are diagnosed?
It's up to them who they want to see. We have lots of patients who are seen outside of the BDC, whether it's more convenient for them, or we don't do contact lenses at the BDC. We do glasses prescriptions. So a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to have a contact lens person and then a diabetes person. It's totally up to them to decide who they want to see. We'd love for everybody to come see us. That would be great. But yeah, obviously there's a choice to be made there. The ADA, the American Diabetes Association, and all of our endocrinological associations, are basically there's been a recommendation that people start getting their eyes dilated once a year after they meet 2 criteria. And one of those criteria is based on duration of diabetes. So 10 years of age, after 10 and beyond, there's no risk of having diabetic retinopathy before the age of 10. According to all of the studies that have been done, very, very few people have diabetic retinopathy before the age of 10. So that's why that stipulation exists. But in the eyes of the ADA, you also have to have at least 3 to 5 years duration of diabetes. So you have to meet both of those criteria. So if a person, well, I guess, and because that exists, most people, under 3 years duration of diabetes doesn't have much to look at either. So a person can have 9 years duration of diabetes and they're age 9, and they still wouldn't qualify to be receiving those annual exams. So that's interesting. Well, they're not over 10. We know that they're at low risk, but they have to meet both of those criteria in the eyes of the ADA to really start those screenings. I don't think anybody's in a hurry to get their eyes dilated once a year, but that's what's out there right now.
Okay. Then last question, how has COVID impacted your eye clinic, and are you still seeing patients? What does it look like for you guys?
Yeah. Well, we were out from March 13th to like May 11th. So that was a solid 8 weeks that the whole building was really shut down, and we were unable to do telemedicine. You need somebody to take a picture of the retina in order for me to take a look at it. So it's, in some ways, eyes are set up good for telemedicine, but not in the middle of a pandemic where nobody can get into the, any clinic, So it has impacted us for 8 weeks. We are back in the clinic now, and we are seeing patients at a reduced load, but we're close to our max. But it's nice to be back. It's nice to have my team back. But it has been kind of an interesting go. But yeah, we are back and accepting appointments currently.
Great. Well, if there are no more questions, I believe we are all done. But thank you. I will turn off your screen sharing real fast. And then, thank you guys for joining. Thank you for being here. And we will hopefully meet. We have another meeting on July 29th with Ellen Faye Ikowitz. She's presenting on mental issues with type 1. So that'll be super fun as well to learn about. But thank you, Dr. Bucca. I appreciate it. And I hope you guys all have a great rest of your night.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry my camera wasn't working, but that's probably for the best.
It's all good. No worries. Have a great night, guys. Thank you.
You too. Thank you, Paige. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.